So, Amphibia is one of those shows that when it hits hard, it hits hard. As I thought about which scene to choose for this episode of One Perfect Animated Scene, there's a few that immediately came to mind. The Anne and Sasha moment at the end of season 1, the Super Anne scene from True Colors, or maybe even that sweet moment from Hopping Mall. But the scene I ultimately decided to go with is one of the darker scenes in the series. The birth of everyone's favorite villain, Darcy.
Why, hello there.
Before we start, I should mention that for those who have seen previous episodes of this series, I unfortunately was unable to contact any of the crew of the episode, so there won't be any interview clips like usual. But like every other episode of this series, before we get into the scene itself, we need to explain the context. This scene takes place at the end of the episode Olivia and Yunan during the first half of season 3. This is the first episode in which we've seen Marcy since Turning Point, and timeline-wise since the new normal, where she can be seen in the rejuvenating Bacta tank. As such, this episode drove a good deal of hype in the fandom, focusing on fan-favorite characters Olivia and Yunan, who had also been absent since Turning Point. Because in the Amphibia fandom, any character that isn't Anne of the Planters is a character you can expect the fandom to hyperfixate on. This episode follows Olivia and Yunan as they grow even more suspicious of King Andrias, as Amphibia begins to be destroyed while he mines the land for resources. Deciding that to fight Andrias they would need a master of strategy, the two agree to sneak down to the castle's basement to rescue Marcy. After sneaking past Andrias' robots, meeting a mossman and some shadowfish, and proving that Newtopia Castle probably isn't on the best terms with the local fire department, they get Marcy out of the Bacta tank and attempt to escape. However, they're quickly confronted by a mysterious entity which creates holograms of each of the trio's worst nightmares. Not living up to your parents' expectations, a legendary warrior caterpillar, and becoming distant with your middle school friends. Once they realize that it's all projection though, it becomes clear that they need to destroy the eyes projecting it, creating a fun Monster of the Week style battle, as Amphibia is known to do. As the last eye is crushed, the trio celebrates and is about to escape. And that's where our scene begins. The first great thing this episode does is subvert expectations. The entire narrative drive of this episode is leading to Marcy's rescue, and as others have noted before me, you could end the episode right here and it wouldn't feel out of place.
We make a good team, huh? Now let's get out of here. Sorry, I might need help.
However, the episode keeps going to give us this masterpiece of a twist ending. Andrias blocks the trio from leaving the room, and in his usual playful tone asks why they're leaving so soon. Of course, Olivia is in shock, wondering how this is possible, but Andrias is one step ahead, and it becomes clear that he has a close connection with the as-of-yet unnamed creature in the basement, as previously seen in the first temple. And right on cue, the core enters the scene with a metallic screech as it makes its presence known, completely changing the vibe of the scene. And as such, don't be afraid to include such tonal shifts in your own work. Understand what the audience expects, and if it makes the most sense for the story, go for it. It's part of what makes this scene so special and helps it stand out from the rest of the series. Before we move on though, this is peak design work. This thing looks terrifying, and its movement on Doc Ock arms is such a brilliant choice. The core reaches for and grabs Marcy, bringing her to a throne rising from the floor, and strapping her in. Andrias then takes a moment to properly introduce and boast about the core, and we learn that the core is
a collection of Amphibia's greatest minds, preserved for all eternity.
As Olivia and Yunan protest, Andrias explains that the Mossmen and the Shadowfish from earlier were keys to helping them conquer death, preserving minds with a combination of natural and mechanical. Marcy starts to freak out, while Andrias explains the core's desire for a host, one smart, the best of the best, and it just happened to be Marcy. Andrias continues to express that he didn't want it to be Marcy, but it had to be to please the core, who he disturbingly refers to as my lord. Marcy continues to struggle in fear as cables are plugged into the suit she has on. Absolutely terrified, a helmet lowers onto her head. Side note, I love how the sound effect for the helmet lowering sounds is like one of those chairs at the dentist. You know the scary sound it makes as you move to a flat position awaiting whatever painful procedure's in store? Yeah, trauma. Even Andrias can't bear to watch the process himself, as the helmet rests on Marcy's head. And that brings me to the second thing that makes this scene great, the character nuances. Andreas' affection for Marcy being genuine despite his evil nature is something that we honestly weren't sure about at this point in the show, but this episode confirms it through his character tics. Additionally, Marcy's expressions are incredibly well animated and really let you feel her terror. And while Olivia and Yunin are no longer the episode's focus in this scene, their bewilderment and fear is fully conveyed through their expressions. You can feel the pain, the betrayal, and the climax of their mini-arc through true colors of fighting Andreas' robots and learning about his past, siding with him for weeks as they saw the planet destroyed, and ultimately seeing one of the people they've known and cared for be possessed by an unknown, clearly evil entity. Each and every expression in this scene is carefully calculated for maximum emotional impact. To bring it back to Andreas though, his body language throughout just perfectly conveys how he's fun-loving, but has regrets, but also enjoys this whole being evil thing. It's so good! As the helmet is placed on Marcy's head, she screams in pain as the upload of the core into Marcy's body begins, with line after line of binary code being pumped into her suit. And here's where we get to the third great thing about the scene. The visuals here are off the charts incredible. The use of the two-tone shadow color inversion to show her pain is so stylistic. This beam of energy is straight out of anime, and the way the numbers flow like a liquid, chef's kiss. Every shot in this sequence is bordered with such a grandiose feeling, and much like True Colors, these shots are one perfect shot worthy. And the lighting and shading of everything here is immaculate, with the orange hues of the core's eyes illuminating the room and the characters. Imagery as iconic as this is something we should all strive for in any of our creative ventures. As the upload of the core completes, Marcy's body goes limp. The formerly bright scene is now eerily dark, the mechanical body of the core crashing to the ground. Marcy lays there lifeless as Olivia and Yunin look on in horror, and Andreas gives the core its official introduction.
The time has finally come for the core to lead us to our destiny. But what destiny, you ask? Well, I suppose I should just let it speak for itself.
Why, hello there.
There honestly couldn't have been a more perfect introduction to Darcy in the show, and this scene truly establishes the core as a villain you don't want to mess around with. It's perfection in every sense of the word. I'm releasing this video the day the finale, The Hardest Thing, drops, so I don't even know how the core's story ends yet, but I absolutely love what they did with Darcy and All In. It was just, so good. Darcy is such a fun villain. What do you think of this scene, Dimension Hoppers? Are there any other scenes in Amphibia that you'd like to see me cover? And be sure to check out the massive fan animation project that I hosted, Amphibia Reanimated, if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you back in Dimension 1.